Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, also known as ETCG1. And hey, on this channel, we start our videos with, if it is your birthday, happy birthday. Yay! All right, for today's topic, I'm sure you're seeing the Fairmont behind me. I'm sitting in the front bumper and yes, it's running and it's driving. Well, driving as much as it can without fenders and doors and such. In other words, back out to the front pad and back. And that happened yesterday and I'm super excited about it. However, despite the best laid plans, despite my efforts, I still have a bit more work to do. I still got some leaks. Got a little bit of a coolant leak up in the front, and I think that might be the thermostat housing. I think I might have to go in with yet something else that was off the Mustang and put in a helicoil, because it seems like the person that owned it before me destroyed every single thread on the vehicle. It's just how they were, I guess. Also, there's a small power steering leak, I think at the power steering rack, and a very small leak at the oil feed line that goes from the oil pressure sending area over to the turbo. So the oil feed line for the turbo has a very small leak in it. I'm going to see if I can address all those things. But I spent most of the day yesterday trying to sort out the clutch. Because even though I was able to get it started, I wasn't able to clutch the car at all. The clutch was not disengaging the transmission. It pretty much kept everything inside the transmission spinning. As a result, you know, grinding gears, that kind of thing. Pretty much had to start it up in gear so I could move it to where I wanted. Well, it was basically the travel of the hydraulic clutch wasn't correct, and I spent some time correcting that. And also, there's a pivot ball on these for the shift fork that I needed to move around and get that into place. Basically, I had to take the transmission in and out about 5 times to make that happen. So I know that it's very serviceable and I can get it in and out. And as long as my exhaust guy helps me out in that department and gives me a nice piece of pipe to remove whenever I got to take the transmission out, we are golden. Not to mention, before all that stuff, I had to get the thing to start to begin with. Those of you that follow me on social media know that I was having trouble getting spark. Well, it turns out the way I had it wired was the problem. It wasn't the magnetic pickup. I confirmed that all the wiring and everything was good all the way up to the pickup itself, but I just didn't understand why I didn't have spark when I could crank. I could bypass the pickup and make the coil fire on my own, but I just couldn't get it to work. So I kept assuming it was, well, I didn't assume, I checked the resistance. And the resistance said open circuit every time I checked them. Well, turns out my meter on just the general beeping continuity test, I thought it was auto ranging. It is not. So I tried a couple of different scales and I found out that yes, indeed, all of the pickups that I was messing with all had the correct resistance, which is supposed to be between 400 and 1300 ohms. I had about 575, which is like dead perfect, or 550 or somewhere around there ohms. And that is dead perfect for that circuit. So I'm chasing my tail, trying to figure it out, and then I just started checking the inputs to the ignition box itself. It's got a 12 volt hot all the time, it's got a ground all the time, it also has an ignition hot. In addition, it has some things coming out of it for the boost timing control, because it regulates, it retards timing based on the amount of boost it gets. So there's a little knob under the dash that I've got hooked up, and basically what I found out is the way I had the ignition wired, I had it through my ignition hot fuse box over on the right side of the car that I put in myself. Well, I'd completely forgotten about when you turn the key to crank, ignition hot turns off, except for the ignition itself, so that all available voltage and power can go to the starter. And because of that, whenever I went to crank the engine, the reason why I wasn't seeing spark is because it was turning off the ignition box. It was one of those dull kind of moments. But anyway, sorted that out, basically bypassed it for now, ran battery hot to the ignition box so I can get it started. Now I can get it started moving around. Everything's great. And then I found the power steering leak. And then I found the coolant leak. And then I found the oil leak. And then I found actually a brake fluid leak. Forgot to mention that. That was the brake line in the right front going up to the rubber line. That hadn't been tightened fully. So I had to tighten that up, and now I got to bleed the brakes, at least on that side again, because the brakes are a little spongy. And I still have to put it back together, and I still have to do the alignment, and I still have to set the ride height and check bump steer and get the exhaust done. So even though I've got it running and I can get it to move, which was a massive milestone that I've overcome, massive, that was huge. I've been working towards yesterday for such a long time, all of you know. And you know, sometimes whining along the way about the difficulties and problems that I've encountered. However, many of you share the same experiences that have built custom vehicles like this. But what I'm trying to convey in this video, and also check with you, the viewers, to see if you've had similar experiences, like when you get to that point where you think you're done, you're not done. And I don't think project cars are truly ever done. I think you're always messing with them. Now I feel pretty good. So many systems on this car work, and work like they're supposed to, and work well. Super happy about that. But there's always work to be done. It seems, and it's just, I guess that's just the way it is. Well, there's been some developments since I started making this video, and I'm going to cover them now. Firstly, the coolant leak was coming out of the thermostat housing, and it turned out that, as I suspected, the threads for this fastener going into the intake manifold were bad, and this wasn't putting any tension on this thermostat housing at all. In fact, on my way to go get the exhaust done, this thing completely let go and sprayed coolant all over the inside of the engine compartment, and there's still remnants of it everywhere. Not fun, but luckily I had a thread repair kit. I've already done a video on thread repair. I'll link it in the description. I repaired these threads. I'm thanking the baby Jesus that it was this top one, because this bottom one would have required, well, at the very least, removing the intake manifold to access. So I was able to do this while it was in the car in about a half an hour. Super grateful for that. But it wasn't over. The good news is about this is that it did fix the coolant leak. So as you can see, it's all dry down in here, and before there would be puddles of coolant that would collect by the distributor here. Very happy that that got taken care of, despite the fact that it was not on my terms, but the car's terms. So after getting my exhaust done, I'm heading back to the shop, and what happens then? Well, down here on the oil filter, there are these lines that go from the oil filter over to the engine that feeds oil in and then comes back out to the engine. Well, what happened was one of those popped off and shot oil all over the inside of this area here. So my core support is now rust-proofed, but once again, just a big old mess, not to mention a loss of oil pressure. I'm grateful that that happened literally at the intersection on the corner outside the shop. I just limped it into the shop as quickly as I could. I've got hose clamps on here now, but I'm going to be switching these out for steel braided lines instead with, well, I'll show you. I need one more of these 90-degree fittings, which is ordered as of today, but this is the line that I'll be using, and I'll be making my own lines for the oil from here on out. But wait, there's more. You may have noticed this zip tie over here, and I'll give you a closer look at the wiring, which is all cooked. I turned the key on and the cooling fans were on, and I was just kind of curious about what that was. So I came over here. All of this used to lay down at the bottom here. So I just pulled up on this wire and it turned off. Well, it turns out this connector for the temperature probe had shorted out against the turbo, because everything in here is getting super hot, because even this stuff behind the blanket is also, you know, even this up here is also starting to show signs that they were damaged by the heat, and even the paint down there is starting to peel away. So it tells me that this turbo gets super hot, and that not only do I need to reroute this wiring, which I'm going to bring up in here, but I'm also going to make some sort of makeshift heat shield to go in this area to make doubly sure that I keep the heat off of these important electrical components. And once again, I ran into another problem. Now that I've solved the coolant leak, I thought, well, there goes my overheat problem, and that's going to solve that. Wrong. Especially when I sit in traffic. And the reason why I'm showing the cooling fans is because I looked up the CFM of these cooling fans, which are good cooling fans. I'm not saying that they're not. But the CFM for these fans is 995 CFM each. So it's less than 2,000 CFM with both of these fans on. It's as much as they can pull. It's not sufficient, especially when I sit in traffic. The car starts to overheat pretty bad, and I end up turning on the heat to help cool the thing down. In fact, it got as hot as like 230 degrees. Was not happy about that, and it wasn't even a hot day at all. Not to mention I haven't even started with the air conditioning yet. So that means these fans are inefficient. I found another set which is going to require some modifications to fit in here, but those are 4,000 CFM. Which is, well, more than double what I have here, and I'm hoping that solves the problem. But it is going to take up a lot more space, and I won't get a chance to see the front of my pretty engine anymore, because it's going to just about fill up this entire area here. However, if it solves my cooling system problem, well, it solves my cooling system problem. This is my new exhaust, which is 3-inch, and I think is awesome. One thing though that you probably notice is that my electric cutout is not here. I'll show you why. It's not there because it's in pieces here on the bench. I've actually had this apart already. I went out driving before I got the exhaust done. I didn't tie the exhaust up and ended up kissing the ground with this and bending it, and I had to take it apart and bend it. I actually got it back together and everything was working fine. However, yesterday, after getting the exhaust done and driving it with a friend of mine, on our way back, I noticed that the exhaust got louder and there seemed to be a rattle underneath the car. Well, here's what happened. This electrical connector came into contact with the outside, in fact, exactly right here, of this assembly, and when it did, it melted. Well, it melted to the point where it made contact against the metal here and ground it out. That made the motor run continuously. As a result, yesterday I took this apart. There's this whole gearing mechanism. You might be able to see down in there, right up at the top, that gear is completely lunched. Fortunately, they made this serviceable and a part that you can purchase separately for about 40 bucks, so I don't need to buy a whole new cutout, but I do have to get a new motor for the assembly in order to use my electric cutout. And you know, honestly, I was never sold on the idea of an electric cutout from the beginning. I wanted to do a mechanical one, but I simply could not find one to work. It's sad because this motor still works, but as I said, those gears are all completely chewed up. I believe the problem why the engine is running lean, especially when it's under boost, is something going on with the fuel pump back here. It should be capable of producing 14 PSI. It's not. In fact, when I crank on the fuel pressure regulator, the most I can get out of it is 8 PSI. That says to me something in here is not right. In fact, part of my mission today is to take this off, remove it, remove the plate and everything going on inside here to see if I can find the problem. And I talked to the people at Holley. There's a relief valve inside here, and I need to see if the mechanism or anything inside there is bad. If it is, and there's debris inside of it, well, that means I get to rebuild the fuel pump. Yay! Lastly, the stance. I absolutely love where this car is sitting right now. I love, love, love it. Unfortunately, it's too low. I did notice, like with very little effort, the underpinnings of the car make contact where they're not supposed to. I'm gonna have to raise this up like an inch to an inch and a half, maybe even 2 inches to get this to a point where I can drive this on the street regularly. And like I said, that disappoints me because I love the stance of this car right now. But, you know, if I want to drive it and not destroy things underneath the car, I have to take that into consideration. Those are all the issues that I had on the first day of operation. Now, all of those are doable, fixable and everything, but you know, it just seems like one thing after another. And that's just how it is. So be prepared. Be prepared to never be done. Well, it's still not over. In fact, it's about a week after the last update, and I have another update. Well, first, the other oil hose went and made all of this mess. It was worse than the first time, lost more oil. My solution, these steel braided lines, which helped immensely. But I got rust proofing all over underneath this car now. So solve that problem. Then I also fixed the cutout, which got a little weird because the motor burned up. And I think I told you about that. Fixed that, so that works. However, I started noticing the exhaust was getting louder and also that there was a knocking noise when going over bumps, and the two things go together. This pipe is separating right here. There's an exhaust leak right there, and it's hitting the stabilizer bar over here as a result because this pipe is sort of coming off. This whole thing seems to be like coming down. The good news is I've been tuning and I've been having some success. In fact, I've been jetting the carburetor down. It was actually too rich, not too lean. Now that I got my air fuel gauge working correctly. So I've been jetting it down, and I've been getting killer results, like not even full throttle, just almost to the floor because I'm kind of scared to go the rest of the way. I mean, it pulls at any speed, and when it pulls, it pulls. It's geared right. It's like those 355s and the gears inside the transmission and the way this engine makes power, all those things work together awesome. And I haven't even got it properly tuned yet. When I do, it's going to be downright frightening, not to mention I still have the alignment and everything to get to. Point being, as many of you have said, this is a work in progress, and it seems like it always will be, because I have one step forward and another step back, just like I did with that exhaust. I'm going to call it a day, and well, back to you, Eric. I guess part of the love we have for these machines, and that they constantly challenge us and push us to get better at what we do, figure things out, like that ignition problem and that clutch problem, and I've talked about this too. I mean, automotive intimacy. The more I work with this car, the more I do with this car, the more things I learn, the more things I'm reminded of that I might have forgotten. Like I said, you know, everything turns off when you crank the engine for the ignition. Stuff like that, you know, stuff that just like I could have had a V8 duh kind of moments. But there they are. And I'm wondering if you've had similar experiences to where you get it all together, you think you're done, and you find out, oh, I still got more work to do. I think that might be just how it is. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there for you. Oh, okay. I know what you want. You want proof, right? All right, I'll give you proof. There's your proof. If you have automotive questions, air@thecarguy.com. There's a link to that in the description, along with other stuff that you can check out. Other than that, thanks for watching. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you next time. That's a big crane. That was a burnout. That's better. Way better.